Welcome back to Market on Close. I'm Sam Vadas alongside Alex Coffey. So just some final thoughts on the session that was. Obviously, the market is keeping a close eye. As I mentioned earlier today, that the 10-year yield, which had been sort of bopping around the 429 mark earlier today, the bond market has very much been in a tight range, as we've seen, but we have also witnessed this breakout that has spilled over into the equity markets. Now, investors seemingly is still trying to price in Kevin Warsh here as Trump's pick for Fed chair. And I mean, he is seen as an inflation hawk, but his comments have been more dovish lately. And that's really what the markets seemingly are trying to get their heads around. Jake Dollarhide from Longbow Asset Management telling me today Warsh, he thinks, is a Jekyll and Hyde pick and could be the least likely to agree with President Trump on rates. So we'll have to wait and see. But the other story we should remember, this is something I've been talking to some of the guests about, is that this is a global market. Now, just remembering the Reserve Bank of Australia hiked rates last night. So we have very much seen the Aussie dollar picking up. So this is a story we are continuing to track as far as some of the yield differentials across the globe. As we're seeing central banks at different stages of their cutting and hiking cycles. Japan could also add some volatility with an election there this weekend. So keeping an eye on that, given we've already seen some of that volatility in the JGBs, particularly on the long end, and that spillover effect it's then had in US markets as well. So there are a couple of the conversations I've been having today, something to keep an eye on. But Alex, what stood out to you in today's trading session?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I think that was hard to avoid, Sam. I mean, it was Mag 7 and big tech today. It was driving the ship. We talked about this earlier with KG. Magnificent 7 as an index finished down about 1.6% today, as did the NASDAQ 100, which finished down about 1.55% on the session. S&Ps were down about 0.8%, despite the fact that about 55% of the components were actually higher on the day. So big tech took the wheel and it didn't let go today. Something to watch as the week rolls on. You got Alphabet and stuff, and we'll get to that in a second, but there's tons still on the calendar that's tied to that exact story. That was the story of the day. Also, the gold market, Sam, $300 move, and it just seems like another day in this asset class. One has to wonder if some of those currency moves that you're talking about might be tied to that too.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be one of the factors associated with the moves that we've seen. I mean, certainly the rally we'd seen last year had been on predicated the dollar weakness there. But let's wait and see. It feels like what goes up must come down, and then it goes back up again. But tomorrow, we're obviously going to be getting some data and a bit of an update, certainly on the jobs market. Remembering we're not getting the JOLTS today. We're not getting jobs Friday with the payrolls because, of course, that's associated with the government shutdown and the BLS not being able to collect some of that data because they haven't been at work. But what we will get is an update from one of the private data collections, and that is the ADP. So let's see what that has to say as a little bit more of evidence of how the job market and the labour market is holding up here. The other thing we're going to be getting is the ISM non-manufacturing PMI, or the services. And of course, this carries a lot more weight than the manufacturing, which we got earlier this week as far as the PMI is concerned. We saw a little bit of a move in the dollar and the yields off the back of that because actually it did improve. But obviously this is a service-led economy, so something to look out for coupled with the jobs numbers. Alex, what will you be watching out for?
Yeah, I want to see how AMD continues to trade, see if it firms up or not, but also tons and tons of earnings. Uber, Eli Lilly, Alphabet, parent company of Google, is going to dominate the headlines tomorrow afternoon. ARM and Qualcomm, as well as Snap. Really busy day again on the earnings front.
Yeah, plenty of moving parts, and as we said, with not a huge amount of data, we're sort of back to the old regime. It feels like we are very much relying on the data, but or the earnings, I should say. But yeah, AMD is going to be a big one. Let's see what happens on this conference call and whether we see a change in tone and whether that reignites the tech trade. I'm also going to be actually watching to see any follow through in the Asian session, given we saw a really nice rally, particularly in the Kospi overnight. Samsung, SK Hynix, I mean, hitting levels not seen since 2008. So we'll be watching. Thanks so much for joining us here on Market on Close. That is going to do it for us.